It's the 12th of September, 2018. I almost forgot what year it was. At least I know what day it is. It's Wednesday, it's 9:30, and you're joining us for a Talking Point Live, and we appreciate you coming along with what we're going to be talking about today. This is a show originating from the campus of Dixie State University through the auspices of the Community Education Channel. And this is our fourth show, and I've yet to go through and even thank the crew for their hard work and what it is that they're doing. Don't let the randomness of the set be an indication of anything that way. That's more my idea. Just to wherever the cameras end up the night before, that's where we're going to do the show, and so that's why we have kind of a different look now each time instead of the kitchen look.
And we should remind viewers that our opinions are strictly our own opinions. They don't represent the university or our departments or
the CEC
or our families or children, especially our children.
Or anybody else, right? I'm Eric Young, by the way.
And I'm Jennifer Kohler.
Yeah, and so you wanted to talk about who we trust, and it's been a fascinating week to go through and maybe analyze that question a little bit.
It has been. It has been.
6 days ago, we had a little anonymous editorial released to the New York Times, and that certainly went through and begged a lot of questions in terms of veracity and trust, credibility. What does that mean? You wanted to, though, to kind of kick this off this morning, and going back to where we left off with last week's show.
Right. I did listen to our broadcast last week so that I would just be tuned in, right? And I did want to follow up on a couple of things that towards the end there.
Okay.
And one thing, at the very end, I was busy referring to something that George W. Bush had said at doing the eulogy at John McCain's funeral, where President Bush had said, you know, I was on the, paraphrasing, I was basically often on the receiving end of John McCain's criticism. And I think President Bush used the words, you know, this isn't worthy of us, whatever criticism he was taking. It's not who we are as American people. And I did find myself wondering when President Bush said that, if he could have been thinking of the enhanced interrogation techniques, the torture memos that had been operating under his watch as a result of intelligence gathering efforts.
Yes, absolutely. That was the context in which he was speaking, because both Bush and McCain were 180 degrees opposed, you know, on that issue. And
so did you take it at all as a veiled regret or acknowledgement that McCain's position was right, and maybe his position at the time
we could
was
read all
misguided?
kinds of things into
anyway, it struck me that way. I thought, is he expressing a regret? Is he acknowledging that McCain was right? Yeah, and
that's how I took it.
Then I had this fantasy. Remember, I had this fantasy of what about a book of former presidents being interviewed and saying, if I could have a do-over, if I could, 2020 hindsight now, see what I know now, what decisions would I change that I made as a president that I wish I could do over? Wouldn't that be a fascinating book to listen to?
That would be the title, Do Over.
Or read, the Do Over.
Yeah.
Anyway, maybe somebody with more skill and access
maybe
than
Bob Woodward
myself
could cobble something like that together.
You know,
we have enough
or
living
Seymour
presidents.
Hersh. I just finished listening to Seymour
Actually, you know
Hersh's
what?
book.
John Krakauer, for me, would be the guy to go through perhaps and research that and put
Here's
that
our
together.
wish list.
Yeah,
That's so
right?
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to follow up on is that towards the end you had brought up the Proposition 2 initiative on the Utah ballot.
Yeah, I blindsided you with that.
You did,
on the show.
and that's just fine. And so I thought, you know, I found myself saying in that interview, I feel like I'm not well informed enough, and I need to do a little research. So what I did is I went to my email and I found the email that I received as an LDS member from the church, and I don't know if it was from the coalition. I could look really quick, but it was related to, we think it's not a well-written proposition, and there's a big long list of people signing it besides the church that think it's not well-written, and we urge you, I think was the word urged, not to vote in favor of it. And then I thought, well, that's interesting, and then there was a link. If you want to know more, you want to know why we think this, we've commissioned a analysis by Curtin McConkie law firm. and what their concerns are. So then I went to the analysis by Curtin McConkie, and I think I counted about 31 legal issues possibly being raised by the language in the proposition or the initiative. So I read through them only once. It's a cursory read, but I did find myself thinking in a couple of points it was maybe a little labored, a little stretch.
Like stretching? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, a little
Okay,
stretch.
right.
And then, so what was your reaction when I quoted you the one about gun users maybe being subject to federal prosecution?
Well, my response to that is, so do those same provisions exist for the prescriptions of OxyContin or any other type of prescriptive pain medication? You know, or do we have these kinds of warnings out there to, and, you know, so it says, you know, don't operate heavy machinery or drive a car, but that's about the extent of it. And the critique of Proposition 2, as you've implied, goes a little far and deep, in my opinion, in terms of what kind of biases are driving those answers.
What I find myself thinking, and I think you brought it up without saying the word context, but you were asking about OxyContin. So these concerns that being expressed by Curtin McConkie's analysis and by people that are not in favor of the proposition as it's written, I, as a typical person and not an expert in this field, I need some context. I need to compare how medical marijuana is, I need more information on how it's being treated when compared to other possibly harmful, possibly addictive pain medications that are currently being dispensed in the medical community. I need to know what those controls are.
So
I kind of need a side-by-side analysis, and maybe there
Good
is
luck with
one.
that. There are plenty out there, and they all have their inherent biases as well. Anybody who is morally opposed to a substance, as opposed to being resistant to its use because of other indicators, they're not, their own automatic attitudinal default's not going to allow them to see what the benefits of that drug might be, or that, in this case, what marijuana might be.
Well, that's a discouraging notion.
Yes, absolutely.
And I want to push back a little bit against that by saying, I can see how easily that would happen, that a bias would prevent a person from being objective. But on the other hand, I like to believe that people can be aware of their biases and then push forward into a more objective evaluation of something. I just don't want to agree that
depends on what's at stake. If what's at stake is a certain investment in a pharmaceutical company, I think we're going to be blinded by that. There are going to be more issues. For me, the criteria boils down to, will it go through and alleviate the pain of people who are suffering, where other types of pain medications, other types of pharmaceuticals are more harmful, are more addictive, are more expensive, are less available. It just seems to go through and beg a market question more than a moral question.
See, I think that's maybe a little simplistic thinking, because what they're saying, these people are objecting to the proposition as it's written, is that they are in favor of medical marijuana use. So they're saying in the fine points,
how it's dispensed,
how it's controlled, how it's dispensed. And there was one objection, well, doctors are not required to, one of the legal issues, well, is the way it's written, doctors cannot be prosecuted for failing to follow up. And I'm like, well, isn't there license by the medical community, their medical board licensing? Doesn't that take the place, right? I mean,
well, that's malpractice insurance rearing its ugly head into the debate as well.
Well, so anyway, I guess my point is,
not to mention the whole federalization of it being illegal as well.
Right, they brought that up as a concern. Right. So I guess for me as a voter, I will say, or as a citizen, I would be looking now for a little more context around how this initiative, as it's written, compares in the legal language and restrictions, like you said, dispensary versus pharmacy. Why is it not being dispensed out of a pharmacy like other controlled substances for medical use? Why the dispensary, for example? Why is that necessary? So there's a lot more detail and information that pertains to whether this is as written good or not. Like they said, you can have a dispensary within 300 feet of a school, for example, and that's a concern, right?
No, not really, not
Okay.
for me at least.
Okay, not
and
for you.
call me simplistic with
Yeah.
that kind of response, but
Okay.
I think that's the problem, is that we've obfuscated the benefits of this to a point to where people are more confused over it, which I think is their intent. I think that's the intent of people lobbying against Proposition 2.
All you have to do is
is
create
to-
a certain level of doubt.
That's all you need to do.
Yeah, you don't even have to prove your
And
case.
then you have the body of the Church of Jesus Christ coming forward, or the leadership of that coming forward, and urging, as you
Right.
say, people to vote in where they've crossed the line with that in terms of that kind of separation.
See, for me, that's no line crossing. They can advocate all day long. That's their role in society. Advocate, advocate. That's what that urging is about. So that's not crossing a line until they ask me how I voted. That would be crossing
That
the
would be
line.
crossing the
Yeah,
line for you.
definitely. But okay, anyway, I just wanted to follow up because we kind of ended with that quickly. And I would just say, having spent just a few minutes, now for me it's a more complex issue, and I feel like if I want to say to myself I'm doing my duty as a citizen, then
You've done your due diligence.
I have not. I've now seen how much is required to
And
make an informed decision.
so you are discouraged to continue on? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just aware that, like almost any issue facing us as a voter, it's not a simplistic answer. And when I settle for simplistic answers, I'm not doing my due
I
diligence.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that we're dealing with an electorate, with a constituency that needs it simplified.
Well, of course we want it simplified. Life is so complex. We have so much to manage in our lives. The simpler, that's why stereotypes are so effective. We talk about that in communication
right.
courses. They help you make a quick assessment of a situation or a person or
Albeit
an
incorrect.
opportunity. Correct. So, right, correct, it's often incorrect. But we love that because we have so many things to process in our lives that the simpler the better. But it doesn't serve us well a lot of times. So let's get around to who we trust. Because if we don't have the time to spend day after day researching the proposition as written, Proposition 2, and we don't have time to become an expert on North Korea and South Korea relations, and on nuclear armaments, and on immigration, and on all the other issues we face, can we then say, I need to be able to trust some people to tell me their informed expert opinion on what I should think?
So we're being overwhelmed, really, at this point. It's the fire hose effect of trying to understand the context of our environment, of our leadership, of our nation, of our role in the world. There's so many things that have inundated us that we don't know where to turn or how to digest that, or what lens do we look at this
So
through.
then we flip on the TV at night and just
and
zone out.
we go to somebody else's default attitudes and don't have the ability to go through and develop our own.
And we've talked before on who we trust in the media
Yeah,
and who we don't trust.
Yeah.
So you want to go there a minute? Or?
yeah, I do. I have to. First off, I would like to talk about the editorial, the anonymous editorial of the New York Times.
Okay. That came out right. I mean, we
Came
were
out the
both
day
made
after we
aware
did
of
the
it that later that same day, I
Yeah.
believe, on
I
Wednesday.
think it was Thursday.
Was
that
it?
came out Thursday morning.
Yeah.
We had talked about it and indicated that we'd be talking about it today during this show. And the more I discussed it with my students, I went through and looked at a lot of responses on the thread of the New York Times opinion, and then looked at some analysis of verbiage, and because we all want to know who is it. We were assured by many people that by this time we would know, and we still don't know.
Who thought we would know? Do you remember?
Oh, Slate magazine,
Okay.
or they're online. I think Newsweek actually put out,
What would it be like to be the New York Times and the writer and
hold
be
that
like a
information?
few people that actually know, and the rest of the world is in suspense?
Well,
that would be
I'll
interesting.
tell you, if I were involved in that editorial, in making that decision, I would regret it at this point.
Regret publishing it?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, tell me why.
Because, well, for a number of reasons. One, that it's not an accurate representation of what's going on. It's somebody's opinion.
How do we know it's not accurate?
Well, because we can't vet it.
Well, it could
I
still
would like
be-
to believe.
It could still be accurate.
And there are
just can't
lots of
prove
other
it's
sources.
accurate, right?
Well, yes.
Sorry.
I kind of live in a world of proof, though, in that respect. More bothersome to me, though, is that it implicates that there is leadership. Don't worry, there is an adult in the room. There is leadership. But the problem with that is we didn't elect that leadership.
No kidding.
They weren't placed there through the democratic process.
Do you think we indirectly elect them
Well,
by
of course
electing
we
the
did.
person
By
who
electing-
hires them, right?
Yeah, by putting Trump in
Okay.
there. Yeah, you can make that correlation, but it still flies in the face of the constitutionality of the federal government. And so while I might like to think, oh, wow, this person's coming along and they're the hero and they're going to throw their hat in the ring in 2020. Oh, by the way, I'm the anonymous one. It'll be
10
interesting to
people
see
step up.
when
Hey, that
people
was
do
me.
that. Its credibility is in question there for me. It would have been, and many have penned an opinion to the same idea. It would have been much more effective had a number of them had the courage to come out and face a press conference and say this. And if they're worried about their job, well, their job should make them worried about their job.
Okay,
If they're worried about what consequences that might be, they'll be set up for life with all the book rights and the movie rights and everything else that's going on. So,
Can I jump in there and disagree?
you want? Yeah, please.
Okay, so I'm listening
You're
now.
still thinking that the anonymous approach was the most appropriate?
Okay, a couple of arguments for anonymous. First of all, the person's not anonymous to several people at the New York Times.
Granted.
So, do I trust them? That's a question. Now, another thing is, somebody said if the person had signed their name, the focus of the discussion would be about who that person is, what their credentials are, what their history is, what their axe to grind is, it would be all about the messenger,
Okay.
and not about the message, which is really significant.
There's a hair to split there in terms of signing their name, and Slate got into this argument as they were kind of focusing on, of all people, John Huntsman Jr. being
saw that
one of
picture
the
you sent me.
suspected. Well, there's a whole article
Oh,
there
okay.
that gets into that. And what they indicated there was that we don't know if they signed it or not, that their
This is
name...
not like a reality show.
It is a reality show.
I mean, seriously, I keep
We've been
saying that.
reduced to that.
We are.
But the Truman Show had
my
better
gosh.
storyline than this does. Anyway.
Really?
So while they might have taken responsibility for the actual document, the name was asked to be withheld. And so there's that hair splitting in terms of, well, did they take responsibility? They obviously know, right? The New York Times editorial staff comes out and says, we know who this is.
2 or 3 or several people.
Right.
Yeah, a few people know. Yeah.
So it wasn't totally anonymous in that respect.
No.
The name was just asked to be withheld.
Okay.
So to go to your point of it being that anonymous, it doesn't hold.
Okay, well, I disagree with your
With my disagreement.
evaluation on that. Let me say more, though. So now I'm listening to Bob Woodward's book, Fear,
Okay.
which came out yesterday,
Okay.
and I'm listening onto it at 1.25 speed because it's like so interesting. I can't wait to get it into my brain, right?
How do you do that when Bob Woodward speaks in such, is it narrated by Bob?
No.
Okay,
Yeah.
because when he speaks,
I don't think it is.
he
Double check.
speaks in bullets.
Does he?
There's a rhythm to his speaking.
Oh, well,
like
anyway.
The Secretary of
I'm
Defense.
just it's like I'm mainlining it, right?
Okay,
in my-
right.
But anyway, what I was just listening to, and this harkens back to whether to quit working in the White House, put your job out there, come out in public.
Yeah, not put your job out there. Put
so
your,
you remember
put
the
your
issue?
patriotism. Put
You
your
remember-
oath out there.
Remember the issue with Rob Porter?
Remind me, I don't.
Okay, he's the LDS guy, or former LDS guy, that was the secretary, the presidential secretary.
Oh, he was accused of.
Domestic abuse.
Domestic abuse, okay, right.
And so
Right.
there was a big fuss in the White House. Well, he hadn't been vetted, or they knew, and they still hired him, and he had to basically quit or get fired, right, over this
Yeah.
coming out.
Yeah.
And like,
Duly.
ha, 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 he deserves it.
Right.
Well, so listening to the Woodward book now, I'm feeling really bad. The guy hadn't resolved that adequately, and that he had to get tossed. Because listening to the book, he really was slowing down Trump initiatives against immigration, against, things that we consider hasty.
Oh, so he was a cog in this
He
anonymous wheel
was
trying to go through.
making a deliberate effort
Do you think he was outed because of that? Was he outed? Were his discretions brought to light by somebody in the administration who didn't want him interfering with the Trump process?
Okay, there's a really good reason to think that. Now that you're saying that, because I can see the Me Too movement being sufficient. So, but you make a good point. And going back now, when I'm listening to this book, I can think of several people in the White House.
That bus is running over a lot of people.
Would have happy to see him go.
Right.
But it was really interesting to hear the specific details in Woodward's book about what he was doing to throw cogs in the wheel, or to throw, to slow down the mechanism. And he was all about process, process, process. You can't just walk in the Oval Office, even if you're a secretary, a cabinet level person, throw down a piece of paper, tell the president he needs to get out of this deal, leave Paris, the Accord. I guess it was, who's the guy? I think it was the EPA guy, Pruitt, was just like, we have to get out of the Paris Accord. Have to. People like that. And they would march in there without going through the vetting process among their peers.
There is no vetting process among their peers.
So Porter was like, this is a bad idea, and you're not following process. Go back and start over again.
Put it through a committee.
As a stalling technique, for sure, in some cases. But still, so man, it's too bad that guy isn't still in there doing that.
Well, connect the dots. There's a reason why he's not in there doing that.
I'm just saying that if those people, you said it, that should have just come out, had the press conference, say, yes, we have been deliberately undermining President Trump, we're going to out ourselves. Now they're all out of jobs. Who's going to replace them? And if they've been deliberately putting on the brakes or being the adults in the room, and now we get rid of them, that seems kind of self-defeating to me. So I don't know.
So maybe the proper action would have been to say nothing at all? What was the reason? What's the purpose behind this anonymous editorial anyway?
That's where I have the mixed feelings about
it. Me too.
Because I'm like,
Let me address that since you brought up Bob Woodward. Okay. Now, I've studied Bob Woodward my whole journalistic life.
Okay. Do you trust him?
I did.
Ooh, past tense. Well, that's intense. Okay, keep going.
I think he has obviously an enormous amount to gain from the sale of this book. And
you mean money?
Oh, beyond that.
All right.
Okay, Bob's been kind of a journalistic wallflower since Watergate, and while he has published on every administration since then, no one's ever really paid a whole lot of attention to him. And so now, and I'm not saying that's his design of coming out with fear. However, when the New York Times anonymous opinion posted, which is in direct competition with WAPO, with Washington Post, Bob Woodward's employer.
Gotcha.
Okay. And it goes through, but it supports the premise of Woodward's book, even using the word fear in the editorial. It just smells funny to me. The editorial comes out at an excruciatingly opportune time on the heels of Woodward's book being released yesterday to stir up the conversation about the validity of Trump's ability to run the country. And then the book hits, and of course it's going to just go berserk.
Okay, we know there are people in the White House that agree with Woodward's analysis that have probably been giving him the information in the book.
Yep.
So these are some of the witnesses or the sources. This person, this anonymous, is one of the sources for the book. So this person does not want the book to go unnoticed. So I can see this person on their own saying, look, I know that book's coming out. I've seen a manuscript copy of it because we know people have seen it before the general public.
There's an ulterior motive.
I'm just saying.
The skeptic in me goes through and says,
what's the motive?
We'll read the book.
No. What are you skeptical about? That Woodward's reporting is not accurate?
No, not necessarily.
That his motive is
It's marketing of it. This feels like a commercial ploy.
Okay. Oh boy. Ooh, I feel bad that you're saddled with that. I mean, I get the marketing part.
I have to go through and ask myself, first off, is it true? Secondly, what are the motives behind the communication? What are the motives behind the objectives?
Does Anonymous
of
have
that
a
message
cut in
out
the
there?
book deal?
I don't know. Who knows?
I mean, okay, I get.
I'm stunned that you're saddled with that.
Well, I feel badly.
That's your own skepticism coming out. It's okay to be skeptical with this, to ask these questions.
No, that borders on cynicism.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, well, it's conspiracy. It doesn't start with a cynicism.
Cynicism.
Okay, I'll admit to be having to have.
And
a
it's
little bit
easy
of
to get
cynicism.
cynical. I mean, totally easy to get cynical. But I would say that there's
You know what's really fascinating is you as a conservative and me as a liberal are arguing the opposite sides of the coin here.
Well, I can't. I don't know what to say about that.
No, I'm fascinated that
yeah.
we not only have we met in the middle, but now we've crossed over in a way.
Okay, I'll agree with you that the release of Anonymous was deliberate, related to the publication of the book. I think it was one of Woodward's sources. And I remember reading in Woodward's book about an important revelation that came out during the administration, was overshadowed by the press following another more salacious Trump kind of a story.
Gosh, which one would that be?
Well, no kidding. So the point is they're probably thinking, we cannot let this go unnoticed. It has to be in the salient to the population.
Okay.
So I think it was a deliberate timing.
You know,
but I don't think it was for dollar signs.
No, I don't agree with. I don't believe that
marketing.
either. I don't.
Okay.
I do believe in the marketing of the message, not necessarily selling the
Okay,
book.
thank you.
But it's the message that I'm
Okay,
talking
well then
about.
market the heck out of it, right?
Well, and 98% of me says, yeah, do it. Put it out there,
Yeah,
whatever
yeah.
it takes to
It
go
has
through
to
and
be
get this guy,
salient. Yeah.
invoke the 25th Amendment, or why don't we just as Americans say, resign. Resign, step down, it's done, it's over. We have no credibility with you at all. We don't believe in you anymore. It doesn't matter what you've done. You are an ineffective leader. Get out of office.
Well, no, not only ineffective because of public opinion, he can't concentrate on his job.
He is so distracted.
The book,
Not that he ever wasn't
the book
distracted before.
details days, whole day periods where he has to cancel appointments, and all he does is watch Fox and CNN and MSNBC, and perseverate over the issues.
I love that word. What does that mean? Perseverate.
That means you just are fixated on something and obsessed by it.
He's the great orange perseverator.
Well, I'm just saying it is impacting his ability to do his job. Definitely.
Impacting his ability. It's leading his opinion.
Well, yes, that too. And there's that.
He's just,
And there's that.
wow, fascinating. So who do you trust?
Okay, well, I'm still
So
on
you
the Bob
trust Bob Woodward?
I'm still in the Bob Woodward train. I'd have to
Overall?
have some damning evidence, right, to like write him off the list.
I agree, and I don't dismiss him,
Yeah.
but I'm a little suspicious by.
Seymour Hersh sounds really good to me too after reading his book about his life, right, his autobiography, and telling about how he operated. And what Woodward says is you have to have these deep sources, you have to have anonymous, or you won't get people telling you what's happening.
Right. Yes,
So,
absolutely.
Anonymous is valid in my mind,
Wow, fascinating.
especially when it's vetted by somebody I trust. I know who my sources are, Woodward says. The New York Times knows who Anonymous is. They're vetted.
And that was okay for you,
It's about as good as it's going to get.
right?
That's what I have to work with.
That's what we all have to work with. In fact, as we try to parse all this out and make some kind of sense in terms of what's going on, I'm hoping we're helping you maybe not make sense, but at least to help you ask some more serious questions about what's
Make your
going
life
on.
more complicated.
That's all you want to do is sit down and join us this morning and complicate your life even more. So,
Yeah.
if you have something more to add to this conversation, you're more than welcome to do so on our Facebook page. And I'm thinking that we're coming to you live on that Facebook page today. The show will be rebroadcast on the Community Education Channel 22.
And you know, Sean plays it on the radio on Fridays.
Oh, he does, yeah.
He does, yeah.
Yeah,
I think between 3 and 5, he
right.
said.
Okay, good. So you can catch the audio version,
Right.
which, speaking for myself, would probably be a lot better.
Then you can be multitasking and you won't really be.
Yeah, you go through and you can make dinner or drive
Yeah.
your car or
Yeah.
read the New York Times, as the case might be. Let's see, we've got 30 seconds to go. Oh, also I was going to tell you.
Oh, don't forget the debate on the 17th.
Oh, 17th
Here
coming
in
up.
the Eccles at 6
It's,
p.m.
how do you
Chris
say-
Stewart and Shireen Gorbani.
Gorbani.
Democratic woman running against Chris Stewart for District 2 of Congressional District.
At 6 p.m. in
Eccles
the
Center.
Eccles Center. So be sure
17th, Monday
get
the
there.
17th.
You need to go through the Utah, There's a size. You have to get tickets. So look it up.
You do?
Click the website. Yeah, you have to
I
get
was just
tickets to
gonna
go.
show up at the
No,
door.
you have to have. It's a
Oh, I'm
ticketed
so
event
glad you
that way.
mentioned that.
All right, 3 seconds. See you next week this time, 9:30. Talking Point Live.